Welcome to the Ben and Ryan Show, everybody.
Woo!
Excitement. I'm Ryan Brown, one of your hosts. With me this week, we have Ben Nadel, of course. Welcome, Ben, my co-host, my partner in crime.
We're happy to be here as always.
Mo methods, mo problems. I like it. I like the little tagline. With us this week, we have James Moberg. Woo! Mo problem. Oh, I like it. I didn't even catch on at first with Moberg here.
Yeah, he's messing with me.
You're so creative. Oh,
you're giving me way too much credit. that was accidental.
Oh, okay. You could have just owned it.
There's an old song, right, from like the 90s called Mo Money, Mo Problems or something.
All right. Oh, we ruined it. And so hopefully within time, today
I have no solutions.
Yeah, there you go.
Today we're talking about ColdFusion custom UDFs. So my goal was within the first minute to actually tell you what we're going to be talking about.
Look them in.
Yeah. They really just come for us to jam out with the rock music in the beginning, and that's the hook. And then like, okay, I got to watch the rest of it to see what kind of craziness is going to happen with this crew. And so we are the crazy crew. And so James has been posting a lot on social out there of his custom UDFs. So we brought him in today to kind of show off what he's been doing. He is your CTO. Is that correct? Of Sunstar Media?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Been with them since before the Y2K bug, ended civilization as we know it.
I think you've got to do like air quotes when you say the bug.
Yeah. moved to California in 2000. They brought me on and been there since. So it's been almost over 25 years now.
Nice. And we'll in the show notes, we'll include links to Sunstar so people can check you guys out. You guys do custom website designs and hosting. And so we'll include links. So if anyone wants to find you, they can find you. Awesome. I know you post a lot on LinkedIn and social platforms. So we'll include your LinkedIn profile as well on there. So welcome, James.
Thank you.
And we will just get started. I mean, before the show, you sent Ben and I a bunch of UDFs. They were kind of your popular ones that you guys use over at Sunstar. And so I'll kind of just pass it to you, and we'll. Do you want to go ahead and pull up the screen, and you can just talk about the first one? We can kind of pepper you with questions.
Sure.
Well, just to be clear for listeners here, a UDF in ColdFusion parlance is a user-defined function. And when we're talking about UDFs, basically we're talking about extending the ColdFusion capabilities, creating our own abstractions that do various things. As I was getting ready for the show, I was thinking about kind of broad categories of UDFs, and the kind of three buckets that I think about are either I am creating an abstraction around more complex logic, or I am creating a sort of proxy to something else, or I am outputting some sort of user interface. I'm simplifying user interface stuff, but generally it's an attempt to simplify and remove duplication from an application. That's kind of how I think about it.
And in the first bucket, did you? I forget now what you called the first bucket. Is that all? Kind of filling in the gaps. So if ColdFusion doesn't have something, or I think in James, some of the notes you put in, Lucee doesn't have something, then you're kind of filling in those gaps with a UDF.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, definitely. It's also nice when your function is uniquely named. I mean, when they say that's the hardest thing about being a developer is naming things.
Yeah, it's so true though.
But looking back to Genesis, I mean, that was like the one thing that God told managers, like, you're in charge of naming the animals. Well, now I'm naming functions. And I'll give this function like the perfect name. And having been with ColdFusion now since I started with 3, and I'll do a function and I'm like, this is perfect name. I mean, this is so well described. And then, a new version of ColdFusion comes along, and what do? They name their function the same thing, but it does something different. It might not be as good as mine. It might be better. It might be more performant. I don't know. But I've been having to constantly go back to the drawing board and change ours so that they don't collide with the built-in functions that take precedence.
You just got to put James at the beginning of all of them. So
James
Moberg or Moberg or Mo. Oh, in honor of Ben, put Mo
there
before
you go,
all of them.
yeah.
So if they do ever take your function name, like I wrote that because Mo's at the beginning of it.
Well, another project that was out there was called CF Backport, and they had an interesting thing too. Like if you weren't on the newer version of ColdFusion, you could like backport some of those functions, and they were just like rewriting them for older versions of ColdFusion, but it kind of like did the same thing as the newer versions. I mean, do you really need a new version of ColdFusion for a function that 9 times out of 10 you might be able to write yourself? And that's been kind of my existence, is finding things out there and saying, oh, wow, that looks really cool. I wish ColdFusion had that. And like, well, wait a minute. I'm a developer. I can make that. And
well, okay. So you bring up an interesting, I think, point of discussion here, which is not only do we have multiple versions of ColdFusion over time that are introducing functions, we now also have multiple runtimes, between Adobe ColdFusion and Lucee, and then Boxlang, which apparently is about to go version 1 at their at BoxCon, into the box. So
very soon.
There are, if you think of these, if you think of the ecosystem as Venn diagram, there is a large degree of overlap, but it's not 100% overlap. And the non-overlap is both a mechanical issue, meaning like this function just doesn't exist in Adobe ColdFusion, but it does in Lucee and vice versa. But then there's also kind of characteristic differences. Maybe like an unscoped variable is slower in Lucee than it is in ColdFusion. I'm just making that up, but I'm saying that there are these differences, and people either choose to focus hard in one thing. You say, you know what, I'm just writing for Lucee. That's all I'm going to care about. And I know we've had this discussion on the social medias. What is your philosophy when it comes to writing code? Are you targeting something specific? Are you trying to reach the broadest base possible? How do you think about that kind of stuff? Well, sorry. Hey.
Lucee?
Yeah. She's barking at me, man.
Yeah, no, the platforms are kind of nuanced. Sometimes I'll be working on something and I'm like, hey, that's this is like the natural name that it should be. And then I'll go to CF Docs and I'll find out, oh, that's what it's called in Lucee. I wonder why Adobe didn't call it that. And then sometimes I'll see a sample of code from your website, and I'll be like, that's nice. I'll try to use that. And I'm like, oh, Ben was using Lucee only syntax there. And that's happened to me a lot. Even worse, though, was when CF Script was just getting started. I don't think a lot of the functions or methods or tags or whatever were like supported. And I kept running into issues where, that's not supported, that's not supported, that's not supported. And it's just, well, let me write a wrapper for it. So now I can make it supported. Now that I've got a black box of this, maybe I'll add some different functionality to it. I took a CF dump. And initially what I did with CF dump was I just said, hey, you know what? Why is it throwing all the HTML into the header and everything else? Let's optimize this. And I just kind of like wrote a wrapper for it. And after writing a wrapper for it, I wrote my own tag. And then after writing my own tag, I discovered that somebody else had written a better one than even I used. that works on Lucee, because mine was also ColdFusion only. And that's always bothered me too, when something only runs on one platform and not on both. I get that happens. Sometimes it's due to licensing. Not everybody, gets the same thing when you go to both of these platforms. But I've tried to make it so that everything that I do runs on ColdFusion 2016. And then likewise, I'll do my testing on try CFM to see if I can get it to work on Lucee. And, usually it works, because that's the way that I write. I do the same thing with our HTML. I want my HTML to be standard, static, compliant, accessible. So I always bring it back to that. You talked about unscoped variables. We've turned that on a couple sites where we said, we're not on the version yet that requires you to scope your variables or anything like that. So since we're still on 2016 in some environments, we went ahead and turned that on and just said, well, how does this stuff play out? How does it work? We quickly identified a bunch of things, and, it makes us stronger. It's a pain point. We've got a lot of lines of code. I can't tell you how much, not every project's the same. Yeah. It's a hodgepodge, but these functions, we've got, our functions, our CFCs, our custom tags. We've been, that's been my focus. And then my business partner, he's kind of like the web guy, the jack of all trades. He'll come in and make it look pretty. I'll give it the brains, but he'll come in and he'll make it pretty. And by using these, CF tags and CF scripts and UDFs, we've been able to, our stuff's still working. I love it when I was able to do a PDF back in ColdFusion 9 using WK-HTML to PDF. It's an executable. We won't get into that here, but the great thing is the PDFs looked awesome then. They still continue to look awesome today. And I keep seeing people posting, oh, this is broken. Oh, this is broken. This is different. And I'm like, I'm just so glad that I'm not beholden to that, because my stuff continues to be consistent, because that's not me. I didn't do that.
Well, let me ask you a question, because now you raised another point in my mind, which is you have various clients. You're building custom applications for people. They're on various versions of stuff. Yes. Do you keep a separate kind of library of custom functions and tags and stuff that you like? Say a new client comes in today and they need PDF generation, or they need some sort of authentication. Where do you have like a repository, for lack of a better term, of the tips and tricks that you use, and you just kind of copy and paste stuff around? How does that work?
We kind of, it's almost like a CDN for all our tags. I've got a directory. I keep it synced with the dev server. I use Testbox sometimes, but having to test different things, I'm usually doing command box, whipping up different servers, running them, manually checking to see if it's the results that I'm expecting them to be. Again, usually there's a little bit of nuance that I have to account for. But, if you've got a good enough unit test, you can make sure that, it's not acting outside the parameters. I like AI, because I'm not having AI write the stuff for me, but I'm having AI say, hey, can you give me some bogus data that looks right, that might not be right? And sometimes it surprises me with what it comes back. Or I'll try to find open source libraries that are, committed to that. But when I get that, I will run it on the dev server. If it works on the dev server and it's performant, and my upgrade to that didn't impact or break anything, we put that on our, if you want to call it, a custom tags directory with that's kind of like a CDN, and then we will sync those to all the servers. And what I like about that approach too is, some of those CFCs are application scope. Right. And, so once they're there, you got to go, we got to go refresh all the apps. But a lot of the custom tags, some of those we reread them on every operation. So if I whip out an update, that updates everywhere, and that updates now. And it's been good for the past 25 years of doing it, that we haven't had any issues. I do have some people that I work with that I don't have physical access to their environment, so it's not something that I can push out to them. And, for that, I really don't have much control. And I'll send out emails saying, hey, you might want to consider upgrading. Well, like 4chan, talking about 4chan here. You guys heard about that? They were using Ghost script to generate thumbnails from PDF files. And apparently their version was from 2012. Security probably wasn't as big back in 2012, but this thing was vulnerable to something. And they ended up putting some executable code on their server. Thanks, GhostScript. But, I'm using a version of GhostScript too, but at least it's updated. And my last update was from like last year. So I'm like, you know what? Probably a good time to update, because there's even more security-focused features available. And, I like outsourcing or, dropping down to the command level. What happened with CFX tags? Lucee never supported them. And that's one of the reasons why we never migrated over to Lucee, because we had like 2 CFX tags that we used religiously that outperformed, the built-in functionality. And because of that, it just wasn't possible for us.
Refresh my memory. A CFX tag was like going to a C binary or something. I don't quite remember what it was.
Yeah. It ran a C+ or C++ binaries. But, that's why I use executables, because both platforms have CF execute. Mm-hmm. And since I'm on a Windows platform, anybody can run an executable. So that made it, preferable. And it was a lot easier too to test different versions. All you had to do was change the path of the executable that you were hitting. Since executables are largely portable, I mean, most of them don't even require installation, but they do, wonderful and magical stuff. And they're not confined into the heap of your regular Java. So if you've got a regular Java machine going and you set your heap, have you ever read? Yeah. Have you ever read
Never even thought of
an
that.
Excel file, and all of a sudden you're like, Java heap, or you're trying to do a PDF in Java heap, and you're like, well, we need to increase the Java heap. Really? I will take that and I'll swap that out to one of our other techniques using, 7-zip, WK, what have you. And not a Java heap error anymore because it's no longer within the heap, and it's kind of sometimes better at managing the memory.
I'll tell you, man, the doling out the command line for zipping was
Magic.
was a revolutionary moment for me, because ColdFusion has had the CFZip and the CFZip param tags, I don't know, since like version 9 or something. And it was what I was using. And I remember we were doing something and we had to zip a lot of files, and it was just really slow. And as an experiment, someone on the team tried to just use the command line, like whatever zip came with the Unix. And what took ColdFusion like 45 seconds to do, the command line, it was like less than a second. I mean, it was like done. And it was mind blowing how fast it was.
Yeah, you find out what you're missing.
Is there just a lot of overhead with that?
I have no idea.
Overhead basically eventually got to the command line.
I think the issue is that the CFZip tag uses the Java zipping libraries, like the Jsoup library or something. And I don't know the low level stuff, but whatever hoops it's jumping through to do the compression is just much slower.
Well, any file operation, I think, is going to be faster when you're not going through that Java file utility or whatever. We needed to access a mail server. We started by using CFTop. Oh, that was so painful. So we're like, well, wait a minute. We're on the same network. Why can't we just open up a UNC path, poke a hole in there, go to the mailbox, because we know what the path is to that physical mailbox. They're just EML files. Pull those EML files over here, and then we can process them, check for messages, extract everything that we needed to do. Did that with ColdFusion, and then tried it with a program called Fast Copy, and never went back to ColdFusion again on that. Because just the process for using Fast Copy, I mean, there's way more options. And again, it's using the OS. It's at the OS level practically. It doesn't have to go through that abstraction. Deleting files. There's a program out there, I forget the name of the company that puts it out. Again, it's an open source freebie type of thing called Delete Files. We had to do directory cleanup. Do you guys use ColdFusion to manage, to look at a directory, find out what's old, find out what's new, and delete things? We were doing that, and we named our files in such a way that I could just go in there and say, hey, delete anything in this directory that's over 3 hours old, because it's no longer a temp file that we need anymore. It's done. Delete files, I was able to specify that and say, don't delete subdirectories, had options. We're talking, seconds rather than, tens of seconds.
Very interesting. I mean, so not that we've gone off on too many deep tangents here at the top of the show, but the idea here is that the platform is both extensible internally to the runtime, as well as the ability to dip outside of the runtime as well. And that's,
that's what I love about it.
Yeah. It's pretty amazing.
Although, if you're on Unix or Linux, I'm not sure. I know that like for WK, there's other versions of them, but not everything that I do has, a cross OS compatible version. And that makes me sad. I'm always asking people, well, what do you use for this, as a developer? And they tell me, and I'm like, oh, that's cool. And then they tell me it's Mac only. And now I'm the sad one. But, I've got tools that are awesome too. And, it's hard to make recommendations because you never know, what somebody's OS is. It really kind of cuts into that.
Now,
but these things I'll be sharing today, though, doesn't matter what you're on. They're just ColdFusion only. So focusing on that.
Where would because it's interesting hearing you guys talk, and I'm like a uber light developer. I can edit SQL code, or I can read code and look at it. But so I'm just here to crack jokes. But I have a question. So for like new developers coming up, where do they find like all these tricks? Because it sounds like you two are the vets out there, and you guys have so much real world experience. How do we shortcut some of this for new developers?
Hit it.
Wow. Well, I don't know. I mean, I've been asking, AI some things like, how would you I'm working with 7-zip right now because I've got some GZ archive files, and ColdFusion doesn't support that. I just tweeted that out this morning, and I'm writing a wrapper now for 7-zip I believe that works on Linux and Unix as well. That will, list it. That does. I want it to do the same thing that kind of like PK or CFZip does. But so I asked the AI, can you please create a wrapper for this that will return the results and turn it into a query? I'm like, it's something that I can do myself. It shouldn't be that hard. The code that it returned was so awful. Not only did it run, but it was hallucinating when it came to ColdFusion with how some of the functions work. And I didn't even want to correct it. I'm just like, thank you. You're how special. Thanks. So I took bits and pieces of it, and I would keep asking it stuff. And what I have is not even the same as what it came up with. So I don't know whether I'm even going to get answers or. It's not like ColdFusion has any information on their website that says, hey, we use CFExecute. CFExecute works with the following type of things on these platforms. There's nothing like that out there, Yeah,
the AI stuff to me, I assume that part of this too is that we just work in more esoteric languages than your React and Tailwind people.
You think that's it?
I assume that's what it is because I'm not blown away the way everyone else is blown away.
No,
and I think
I'm not either.
So I'm learning Wheels, CF Wheels right now. It's one of the kind of the three ColdFusion frameworks, and I've been asking ChatGPT just because it's a lot to get up on speed. It's a very robust, complex framework and has an ORM and it has a lot of magically available functions. And I've been asking ChatGPT, and I feel like it's hallucinating half the time at this point, which is like much larger even than it would normally. It's telling me.
Have either of you guys tried doing custom GPTs where you preload in like the documentations for ColdFusion or for CF Wheels?
Yeah, so, I would like some documentation to feed it. It's kind of a hard thing to come by.
So I do have a PDF of the Wheels documentation, and it's not a custom GPT, but it's just the chat. You can upload files to it. So I uploaded the PDF.
No better.
I mean, I don't have a control group to compare it to, but I don't know. I'm just it's one of those things. It's like, okay, so when you're very familiar with the way code works and you ask the AI, it's much more obvious to you when it's wrong because you have so much domain expertise. But for something like this, where I don't really know how Wheels works yet, or I don't have that muscle memory, it'll tell me to try something, and I go and I try it, and I get an error, and then I don't know if the error is because I copy and pasted wrong, or I wrote it wrong, or I have a different kind of configuration or something. So then I'm going back and forth. So the things that would normally have been obviously wrong to me because they're just made up in another context, in this context, I don't have that familiarity to lean on, and it's much more frustrating. So I don't know how common that is.
It'd be an interesting experiment to work with Adobe on is to kind of create. I guess I've never looked for documentation on CF, but to kind of create that, see if we can help hallucinations on ColdFusion by feeding it more information. Kind of like the whole RAG idea, where you kind of augment the existing knowledge of the base LLM with custom information to produce a better result.
But I'd like to see Markdown documentation. I know Stripe just released all their documentation in Markdown format. That's not hard, and AI can read that. I know right now, sometimes when I go to the ColdFusion documentation, it kind of like challenges me and it shows me a white screen and does some updates and tries to log me in. And I'm like, what's going on here?
It's just documentation. It is.
Why? Yeah.
You get to something and then the page refreshes.
Yeah. And then sometimes there's things that are like assumed that are like totally left off. They're like, if you want to set something, set this equal to yes. And it's just like, okay, so is the default no or is the default false? Because sometimes you have to actually use the words yes and no.
Right.
Rather, and it's not document. Yeah. Or never. Those are great things too, but there's some updates that need to happen to that too. And I wish I could update that stuff, but I use AI to challenge assumptions. I know how something should work. Or, I've been doing this for 25 years. What's changed in the world of HTML or CSS? And like, oh, I didn't know that tag existed. That is so cool. So I'm trying to create a more modern web front for this, for a website that I'm working on called My CFML that will share a lot of the code that I've been working on, especially some of the Frankenstein hybrids of the executables and ColdFusion, the merger of it. I'm using the dialogue tag. That dialogue tag is amazing. And it's finally supported everywhere. So I'm always going to like, can I use? Because, back in the day, we had to worry about Internet Explorer 6. Back if you wanted a font, you had to use Flash in order to render a font that was special. There's so many things and struggles that we had as developers that new developers will never have. Yeah. So it's just like when we explain it, they're like, well, this works. And, or I was talking to some guy and they were talking about creating email addresses. And they're like, well, if you feel uncomfortable doing that, creating email addresses, we'll just, go to AI, and I think I could have something running in 15 minutes in Python. And I'm like, oh, go there, do that. I don't know what you need me for. But, seeing what AI is generating, a lot of it, even for my purposes, I'll never use it. I have to refactor everything. And again, I'm challenging my assumptions. It's not going to replace me at this time. I don't know.
Speaking to Ryan's question a little bit more, just on like, how do you get people up to speed? The mechanics of ColdFusion are fairly familiar to other languages. So if you think of the basic atomic unit as your function, and functions basically exist in other languages, most other languages, JavaScript and ColdFusion feel to me, if you're writing script-based ColdFusion and JavaScript, if you remove some of the required tags and the return type annotations, JavaScript and ColdFusion look very, very similar these days. I think there's a lot of familiarity that people will have. So there's not a ton of cognitive load, I think, coming to ColdFusion from another language. We have functions, we have components, which might be the equivalents of a class in another language. The thing that I think sets ColdFusion apart is I think one of the crowning achievements is the ability to invoke functions both using named arguments and ordered arguments, and to kind of just do that seamlessly. That is something that I don't see in other languages, and I find it to be hugely valuable.
I can't really compare with that. I can't really compare because I haven't been in a lot of different languages. So
I haven't either, but it's not something that I ever see anybody talk about. But in the JavaScript world, if you need to send a whole bunch of arguments to a function, typically the pattern will be that what you're actually passing is an object. And then the arguments are the keys in that object as a way to create named parameters. But in ColdFusion, you can just do that. That's just part of the semantics of the language.
Right. Order or named, or even set, attribute collection, argument collection?
Argument collection, yeah.
And that's the thing that I like to do is I like to predefine everything, because if I need to debug, I can actually dump that to the screen and say, well, wait a minute, what were my settings? This is what I was expecting. Are these really the settings that I'm passing to that item? And when working with CF Cookie, I found that the way to pass some arguments were to delete the argument altogether and not pass it, and which seemed counterintuitive to me, because it should have a default. So the question is what is the default?
Right. Like I think if you want to create a session cookie, you have to never pass in and expires, I think, something like that. Anyway, should we look at some code? You want to look at some code?
Yeah. And Ben, my question was more about not necessarily just the general coding of CF, but these things that you are talking about right now. Is okay. Hey, CF cookie, you have to do this. Okay, don't use CFZip because it's too slow to do things. And some of these tips, which if you're someone starting off and your first try at doing something and you have a project and you're like, oh, let me do this, and you're like, oh, this kind of sucks. All right, well, this isn't as great as we thought it was. So let me now go to Python.
Yeah, a lot of that stuff's going to be entirely dependent on your infrastructure, your environment. If you're in something and you can't upload, or sometimes CF execute's disabled, then what do you do? Now you got to use CFZip, or pray that somebody gives you something compatible. Working with images, graphics magic is amazingly fast and works with way more image formats than CFImage does. But again, if you don't have the ability to tap down into that because you're hosting with a third-party provider in a shared environment, there's no way you're going to get that. And my advice to new developers would, I think it's the same as every seasoned ColdFusion developers, don't use CF UI tags, right? Stay away from the
I think
CFUI
they're
tags.
actually removing that finally in 2025.
Yes.
I think there was a lot of deprecated stuff.
I was working on a site that had them all over the place, and CF form, CF input, and I'm like, what are you doing here? Well, we're validating. We need to make sure that those fields are required. And I'm like, use a required tag. It's an HTML thing. You don't need that. But
right.
All right, so Ben, maybe we just do a bunch more of these shows. And so all the junior guys can kind of just start watching our shows and we'll create the documentation and in my CFML, you can start doing some stuff as well. They just kind of look at there and Ben, and there we go. So,
well, and you also just mentioned like how do people get familiar with some of this stuff? One of the nice things about ColdFusion, and I think this is true in both Lucee and Adobe ColdFusion, is that the debug template, so the kind of what your page did template that outputs at the bottom of the screen, will oftentimes include, I think, definitely the templates that were invoked and the execution times of the templates. And I think it might do the method calls, but I might be making that up actually.
I know you've dug deep into that before.
It's been a while, but then also we've all seen Fusion Reactor at the various conferences. There are application performance monitoring tools that help you dig in to see where the slow points are.
Well, I've used I have a custom tag called timer, CF timer. It does what the built-in function does, but unlike the built-in function, I don't have to have debugging enabled. Because I always thought that was a weird requirement in order to time how long something takes. Why do I have to enable debugging across the thing? You started it here, you end here, let's output the time. And that's basically what my custom tag does. There's a couple other ones that are out there like that I've seen. And that's how I determine whether something's, better or not better. You do the get tick count, and at the end of your function, you can say how many milliseconds have passed since I've been doing this. And the stuff that I'm going to show you here is fairly performant.
I love it.
Nice.
Let's do it.
So for all of you guys listening and watching, we had spent 30 minutes just kind of chatting. That was so we'll give you a shortcut link to get to the UDF section should you not want to hear us chat.
Yeah,
but that's the fun of the show.
There you go.
Well, we've been developing for a long time, and I think when we were first uploading images, if the account was number one, your image became number one. That's not a good way to save things. We've never got really, when we saw bots going through and requesting images without actually going to the web pages, we knew that there was something going on. But even worse, we got this UDF we've been using now called hash ID, not to be confused with hash IDs, which is a pretty good library on its own for specific use cases. I wouldn't use that for like a lot of things, but hash ID and is hash ID value is something that we use in our infrastructure. Just to give you some examples of what happened, Panera Bread was a good example of this. You could go to their website, type in any ID number, and see somebody else's receipt, because all the receipts were just integers. Parler, which was a social media platform, again, you could access any of the posts by just typing in the ID number, which is an integer. Integers are great. Integers are fast. They're database friendly. They're easy to remember. They're also sequential. They're also easily guessable. So what we've been able to do with this hash ID and is hash ID valid is, and you'll see that when I do things, you mentioned this a little bit earlier there, Ben. I am scoping everything, even in these functions, because I've made the mistake before where a database has a column name and that column name is URL. And that's not an illegal database column, but when you start getting into ColdFusion, if you're doing some stuff with it, it can become problematic when you're trying to output URL, and it's just like, well, it's complex, and it's just like, no, it's not a complex scope. It's the name of the field. So we always scope everything as, not everything, but in these things we do. So this accepts a value, any value, maybe even an integer. It takes extra. This is just basically a salt, and then an optional delimiter. And then what it does is it outputs something. I think I have a vision of that up here. So I did the test code here. You can see here that if I'm creating a hash of the word default, it's just an MD5 hash of the word default plus the salt. And then, my expectation is this valid? Yes, it is. It's assuming this value with no salt. Maybe that error message is not correct. But you can see here I did another one with underscores. This works with numbers. So whenever we save images now to the directory, what we'll do is we will set a global variable as the salt throughout the whole thing. And then whenever we're calling hash ID, we say, hey, I've got a new image for account user 56. What this will do is it'll do 56 dash something, and then we'll create a file that in our file system that's 56 dash something. And the beauty of that is, you know what comes after 56 is 57, but you don't know the rest of that hash.
Right.
So I guess it's not even security through obscurity. It's just it's making things more difficult for the script kiddies out there.
James, for everyone's benefit, are these going to be? Are you going to post these on my CFML then for anyone to get access to?
Yes, I can post that on my CFML. But yeah.
Okay.
I'll post this whole article, this whole thing that we're looking at here. And again, we don't use that really for like secure purposes. Sometimes we'll put that in a URL. I've seen websites where the blog IDs are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can basically tell in what order they were entered in. The other reason we use this too is sometimes on admin tools is we don't want people accessing other records. Mm-hmm. So when they click on this to edit, the ID that gets passed will be like, again, for user number 56, we'll say user ID equals 56 dash, and now a big long MD5 hash.
Well, let me ask you this. Have you taken the leap, and I call it a leap because it's so scary to me. I have not actually motivated to do it yet. But have you taken the leap to use like a UUID or something to that effect as a primary key in your database?
Yes, we've done that. We've done that on rather large databases, but we'll also throw another key in there. In fact, later on, I'll be showing you. I think we've talked about something called hash code before. Mm-hmm. That works really well with strings. A little bit of collision in it that could happen theoretically. I don't know that I've experienced it yet, but we've used the UUIDs, and sometimes we use them as keys, but we generally also have some sort of integer inside, because if I have to link that to another table, I don't want to be doing joins on UUIDs. You know what I'm saying?
Okay, yeah. I think so you have like an internal ID and an external ID kind of.
Yes. Yeah. So it's a double-pronged approach to it. Then we'll have the public, hit the UUID for obvious reasons, and then sometimes some of the tools will use the internal one to do all the joins and some of the harder functions that would go a lot slower with the UUID. We're doing a major. It's major. Yeah, it's slow.
Our ERP uses UUIDs.
Yes.
In conjunction with actual numeric values, as you were talking about for primary keys. But they do it so that, let's say you want to associate a customer with a task. Well, then you can just associate the UUID. But let's say you want to associate an inventory item with a task. Well, instead of having to always choose, okay, hey, what type of object am I picking? It can all it has to do is store the UUID as the key within the task table, and then you're going to basically a UUID table to figure out what type of item has been attached.
Well, it's also nice when you're working with like multiple servers and they don't all have the same ability to, know what a consecutive number is, like, +1, or if you're importing like a lot of data, those unique identifiers are like really nice, because now that's totally unique because it's not a UUID that matches what's in my system. But this is just a great way of having a serialized number. Again, we use it with numbers. We don't generally use it with strings, but it can be used with both. But using this with numbers is just a great way to obfuscate, I guess, those values and make it harder for people to do it. On our admin tools, I can still go up to the top and it says user ID equals 56 dash something, something, something. All our applications know that I'm the developer because on my environment, my host IP address, the headers that go to the website, the web application server. So we've got a framework that knows that not only am I a developer, I'm in my internal network and I am the James developer. I can actually go up there and just say 56. And we add logic to say, hey, if you're a developer, don't make this a requirement that you do that, because sometimes people will know the ID number, but they won't know the whole hash, or they won't give me the URL. I love it when clients can give me a link, because I try to make everything link friendly so they can be bookmarked and shared and everything else. When that doesn't happen, I don't want to have to sit there and hash the number myself with their special salt in order to figure out what it is. I actually have my little backdoor again, but that's based on my authorization as, a developer.
I like it. One of the nice things about, in my experience, providing both a numeric ID and some other more complex ID, and this, is going to be very application dependent, is I always get a little weary of indexing text columns, but I never have any hesitation about indexing an integer. So I can always look something up on the integer field and then verify against the more complex token if that's also stored in the database.
Well, hinging off of that, I've got a client today that was upset because one of their URLs wasn't working. It was having a right to left character added to the end of the URL when it was being redirected via SendGrid. And the question was, can you fix that? And I'm like, I didn't add that. I looked at their database, all their URLs were being saved as nvarchar, which you shouldn't need, high ASCII characters in a URL. So, you're doubling the storage for the URL. And then I'm looking at it and it looked correct. I copied it, I pasted it, took a look at it in VS Code. I had this feature turned on in VS Code where you can say, turn on any high ASCII, highlight any high ASCII characters. As soon as I pasted both the URLs and compared them, I was able to see that it's had this weird white space character at the end. And then the light bulb went on. It's not my problem. It is a data problem. I don't control the data. That is from another program that they use running an Access front end. And when I was looking at it, I'm like, you know what? I wonder how many other URLs in that specific column had it. There were like 80. I'm like, well, how about this other one? There were a bunch. And I ran another script that says, hey, look at all the columns and all the tables. Give me anything that's got this character. And there were thousands. And some of the thousands were on keys that they used to join to other tables to do their reports, like the location of the... Yes.
That's awesome.
And it was just like, you know what? This ABC does not equal this ABC over here because this ABC has got an extra hidden character at the end of it. Well, you might not have noticed it before, but as soon as you fix this, you're going to be much happier. You're going to see your data all join up and be correct. But that's why I prefer using numbers too. And also dates. They're either null or they're a date and there's no hidden white space character after it.
I know you have a UDF because I also have a UDF for stripping out the stripping out or normalizing white space.
Yes, and
there's I can't tell you how many times I have exactly to your point. You're looking at data; it's got some crazy white space, and it'll be in the middle of text that customers enter. And I'm like, "What did you do? How did you get a vertical tab in the middle of your writing?" And they're like, "I have no idea. I have no idea what happened."
They're copy and pasting from something that had it. In some font library.
Right.
I'm wondering if AI will do it, add a non-breaking space so that it keeps two words or two thoughts or two ideas closer together. Because again, you don't know where this is coming from. I think they pasted it from probably Word or maybe copied it from a web page, and knowing how Microsoft works with their rich text type stuff when they pasted in, it wasn't sanitized. You need to sanitize your inputs. I didn't write that other program, so that's something that'll have to happen on their end. But my UDF did a lot of identification because my whole thing is I didn't want it to just strip it. I wanted it to tell me, yes, there was some here. And what kind of white space is it? Is it a spacer or is it a joiner? Is it considered safe or unsafe? And those were 4 different facets because sometimes, it might be an okay thing, but never in a URL, never in a URL. Yeah. When they kept getting these errors on the page saying that product couldn't be found. And look at the URL. How did that stuff get added up there? Well, in the URL, it gets URL encoded, right? Mm-hmm. All that hidden character stuff becomes unhidden, but in your database, you can't even see it. It's
PTSD.
Yeah, I know. Butterflies. It's just don't do that. So let me get rid of this one. The second one on here, we do a lot of email. We do a lot of HTML generation for emails. We do a lot of HTML generation for PDFs. A lot of times when we're done creating that HTML, we'll use Jsoup to fix any broken HTML that might exist. I know you use Jsoup.
Oh yeah, you're the one who got me on the Jsoup train. So
I think you were the one. I think you were in some coding thing back in the day. You were using Jsoup to extract CSS and apply it directly into HTML elements. You wrote
This
that
was
and you showed that back in the day. And I'm like, you know what? It can do more than that. That's not all it does.
Well, that's what it is. Yeah. I used it as part of like I think it was like a ColdFusion 8 hackathon. And then I never used it again. And then you started talking about it. And I don't know, maybe like 5 years ago, I took another look at it. I'm like, oh, James is always talking about Jsoup. James, because I was using
well, I'm the reason that you're looking at it, or you're the reason I'm looking. You're the reason I looked at it, and it's come full circle.
I think you had finally sold me because I was using the OWASP anti-SAMI sanitization, and it has a complex XML configuration. And you're like, dude, just use Jsoup to do a cleaner or whatever. I can't remember what it's called off the top of my head.
Yeah, they have multiple formats.
Finally, awesome. I looked at it. I was like, oh my God, this is so much easier.
And, I've reported things to that developer and he's like, oh, you're right. And, boom, 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 the update's out in just a month or two or whatever. There's always been a fix for it. I've always been happy with it. But that's what I like about working with, some of these smaller, and that's a jar. That's not even an executable. And that's something that can be added to any project. And Jsoup is magic. But we will use Jsoup just to make our HTML look really nice. Now, if you go to any of our websites and take a look at the source code, you're like, that doesn't look like it was written by hand. And before, the other thing that we used to do is we used to try to make our HTML look really good, or we tried to compress it to try to save on space. We don't even bother anymore because at the end of our HTML page requests, we actually get the stat. I'll show you that later on in this code here. I have a little helper here. We'll actually look at the output buffer and we will take that HTML, we will add nonces to it so that we can do CSP. We will move some JavaScript to the footer. We will move some to the header. We will move styles before JavaScript. I mean, everything is done by Jsoup. Yeah, it's all magic. And I've also written a Jsoupified library to go through and add the accessibility stuff. Because it's really important that if you have an iframe that you also have like a title tag or an alt tag or some other aria tag. I forget what it even is. But, my business partner, he's the HTML guy. Again, he comes and says, we need to do this. I sit down, I figure it out. So we've got a library that does a lot of that stuff automatically, and you can't repeat those tags. So, we built in a little counter. This is link number 2 of this. This is link number 3 of this. When it does find some duplication so that because again, if somebody is coming to your website with a scanner, explicitly looking for an accessibility error so that they can sue you, I don't know if you've ever had that happen. We've have multiple hotel clients that's happened to. And wow. It's nuts. So if your website is not HTML, if it doesn't validate as standardized HTML, that's an automatic ding. You've failed. So Jsoup fixes those errors. And then our little accessibility function goes through and adds in all the other missing pieces. And for the most part, we pass the test, but every once in a while, there's customer provided data that we have no control over. And, if they're not adding enough metadata into the admin tools that we make available to them through their content editor, we're at a loss. But Jsoup is amazing. Yeah. So now that we've got the HTML for the email, or we've got the HTML for the PDF, I have this function here called create shadow HTML, because we were embedding these on web pages. And what I would try to do is I would stick them in an iframe, but then the iframe, you got to scroll up, down, left, right. And that's a pain. And what if you wanted to interact with it? That's also a pain because now you're within a frame and it was weird. So what we use in this tag, basically what it does is it creates we're making sure that all the stuff's unique. It puts it in line. It turns your HTML into JavaScript, or I'm sorry, what does it do? JS encodes it. There we go. And then brings it in. So if I had a document here that was just hello world with a link to unsubscribe, and I put in a style that says, hey, make everything red. If you did that and you tried to include that on your webpage, you now have a problem because you've done some sort of inception. You now have a HTML document within an HTML document. There can only be one doc type tag. You can't put that in there multiple times. Same thing with the HTML, same thing with the head, same thing with the body. If you're duplicating them, you've got a problem. And if I put that in there and I'm doing Jsoup on top of it, Jsoup is going to fix that. But how is Jsoup going to fix that? I don't want to find out, to be honest. So what we've done here is we go HTML preview equals, here's the preview. Do you want to enable links? I say, no, I don't. And then I'll write that output. Now that I've got that HTML preview code, I will output that. And I said, you know what, give it a black border and make it 30% smaller, scale 0.7. And so that's what you see here is I've got that same code here, and I've created, and this is cool because this is on TryCF. I actually have, this is a web page, and if I try to click unsubscribe, it's going to pop up and say, sorry, links aren't enabled in preview mode. And cool. And if I had more code on this page, in fact, let me go down here and type in some more stuff. Put in a paragraph tag and hit run. You can see that my text here didn't become run because this right here, this CSS code, if this was part of the same parent document, this CSS code would have written everything and made everything look like garbage. So this allows us to put previews right on web pages without having to ever do anything weird.
That's pretty cool. I know that you had just mentioned if you put it in an iframe, there's a lot of hurdles you got to do in terms of scrolling up and down and stuff. I was looking at some sample code the other day on some site, and there was iframe has an attribute. I think it's called like doc source, where you can literally just paste the source of the iframe into it. I had no idea that it exists. I went to can I use, and I think it's been around for like 15 years or something. I mean, you still have all the issues, the fact that you're dealing with an iframe and the size of the iframe, but I can't tell you how many times just in my career, back when iframes were like more of a thing that people would use, like having to generate documents and like inject JavaScript that you could then portal into the iframe to have it paste into the body. And like apparently none of that was necessary.
Right. All the parent-child communications things that you have to do. We're not doing any of that with this. In fact, if you had JavaScript in this HTML document, the shadow DOM doesn't support that at all, as far as I understand. I think that would be dead and mute and not work at all. And then the other reason why we killed the ability to do that is a lot of times we have like a default unsubscribe links that don't really unsubscribe, and sometimes the links can be tested, but we really don't want to test them out. So having the ability to say, hey, don't have, this is for preview only. And again, if this was like a really big page, you'd be able to scroll down this page and you won't see any left-right scroll bars at all. It all fits nicely within this element of this page. It's really kind of like publishing. It's like I just published a web page on this web page.
That's really nice. Ben, I think weren't you talking about shadow DOMs on working code with one of the guys? You may have also been talking about in the context of Stripe, maybe about the and maybe
Stripe uses
yeah. Stripe has a very complicated thing with PCI version 4 compliance, where they're running custom code inside of a web worker, and they have to communicate across the web worker. It's like an API call. I don't know that much about web workers, but it seems bonkers complicated.
Yeah, getting information in and out is a lot more work than what this thing does for preview purposes only. But the shadow DOM is amazing. It's also very complex. I think there was a seminar at the ColdFusion Summit on it, I think, for the past 2 years, or maybe not the past 2 years, but I know that Sacramento, what's his name?
Nolan Irk.
Yeah, I was going to say, I've got his CD right here. He's a musician. He loves this. He loves working in the shadow DOM, and there's some great UI type stuff you can do. But Stripe, by doing that, has also made sure that nobody's messing with the transaction data of that little user, of that thing. And also, it blends in perfectly with the website. It's so much better than using an iframe or using
iframes now have all iframes have all the security issues now, where you've got is it like cross origin? Something with cross origin, I believe you have to like authorize or something for the iframe if it's not the same, if it's not coming from the same domain.
Oh, interesting.
All different kinds of stuff.
Yeah, we've always had frame busters too, So, hey, am I in a iframe? Oh, I am. What website am I coming from? Oh, I'm coming from my own website. All right, it's legitimate. I will, I'll be an iframe. But yeah, we've had other people like frame content before. And what's funny is, you can use JavaScript to display whatever you want when they do that. Whoops. So yeah, that one right there is Shadow DOM, or create Shadow HTML. Stream bind new case. What's interesting about this thing is I was looking back, and back in 2012 or 2015, I found this in a user group regarding Railo, and I don't know. It's just been so useful for us. We have some custom modules that we use from time to time. Sometimes they're called on a page completely on their own, and the problem is we don't know what other JavaScript libraries or what other things might have been called in to be part of it. And this is just a one-off. We don't use this like all the time. I mean, we'll use the same kind of like logic, but all this does is it gets the all this does, right? All this does is determine whether you're Lucee or Railo or ColdFusion, and what it does is it gets the output buffer, it lower cases it, and says, hey, you just given me a string. Can I find that string in the output buffer? And if I can, let's do some stuff with it. And those are some of the things that we do. But again, I'm talking about here, we use Jsoup to tidy the HTML. We move JS and CS up and down so we can be fast and compliant and everything else. But this is a method to like lazy load libraries. Like I can say, hey, if we've done loading this page here and I'm at the end of it and I've streamed the code and I see that we're using, this jQuery syntax here, but I can't find jQuery global anywhere because that's part of my, whoops, that should not be jQuery global. It should be just /jQuery this. And it doesn't find that this library has been included physically, manually, static HTML on the page. Go ahead and include it at this point. We use a date parsing JavaScript library. And here I can say, hey, did we use that JavaScript to do it? This is case sensitive now at this point. And you did not find the library? Let's go ahead and do it. So there's a lot of dependency injection type libraries out there. We don't kind of like inject anything. We kind of like get to the end and we kind of say, hey, what do you have really going on there? And our library will then include everything in the order that it needs to be in. So that's all that does.
That's really nice.
Get page context. This is where my understanding of ColdFusion starts to fail, because I know, or my understanding here is that get page context is sort of part of the Java servlet abstraction.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And once you get down to that, I have no idea what's going on mechanically. And I think this is, but it's if you dump out, this is for listeners, if you dump out the get page context, it's massive. There's tons of stuff in there.
And you dump and you try and you experiment. Yeah, no, I've come from a school. I mean, back when I was 15, I had myself a Commodore 64. I was like the founding member of the Hibbing Area Commodore Club. In fact, I Googled the other day and I found an ad in one of the old publications. And I'm like, that's me. But yeah, we started this back in the day. And, Hibbing Area Commodore Club, we spelled club with a K. So, we got the word hack there. My business partner doesn't want me to use that word. But you know what? I love that word because, I keep hammering at things, trying to get it to figure out poking and trying to figure out what things do. And then I also try to see how I can do that some other way, or what happens if I'm always trying new things, just kind of like a lateral thinking exercise with ColdFusion and Java. So I modified his existing code a little bit. I gave it reference here, and it's a Google group. I'm surprised it's still there. Again, things have been disappearing. I like to reshare. And this is one of the things where I reshare and gave credit where credit was due. But this just returns a true or false, saying, did you find that string in the output buffer? And if it does, a lot of times what we'll do too is we will CF output and then put that, clean that buffer up with Jsoup and then output it onto the page. So that's this output buffer right here is kind of important. Excuse me.
We did something one time, and I think this was before we were sitting in front of a CDN that would automatically gzip content. You can basically take the buffer and run it through the gzip algorithm and gzip your own code on the way out.
Yes.
I mean, most of the time people don't think about this because they have something like IIS or Nginx or something sitting in front of it that'll just kind of do that for you, I think.
Yeah, I do that now. I think my brother he works in the .NET world, and I walk with him Monday through Friday in the afternoon, and we talk about high level stuff. And he's always talked about how he will take his JSON content and his cookies and stuff, and they'll Gzip them up, and their platform handles that like automatically. The .NET platform does. So it's kind of neat how they exchange that data back and forth in that type of condensed format. I can't wrap my head around that. I mean, it's not like you can look at it coming in and know what's happening. You have to sit there and decrypt that whole thing. But yeah, being able to look at that output buffer or even capture that output buffer. I have not tried ColdFusion 2025 yet. I have not even downloaded it yet. I'm hoping this is still possible.
Probably. They definitely have get page context, because I was poking around at it, I think, the other day.
Yeah. Okay. Because I know they said that they've upgraded engines and stuff. And so I know that this will work back, I think, all the way back to ColdFusion 7 or I'm sorry, 8 or 9. I forget when they moved to Java, but this has existed in both platforms. So it's relatively easy to pull off.
Well, and then this is the ultimate trade-off here is when you extend the platform, when you extend ColdFusion either with your own UDFs or by dipping down to the Java layer or doling out to EXEs, there is always a give and take where the take is, who knows if this is still going to work in the future. And, for the most part, ColdFusion is really, really good about being backwards compatible. That's a huge priority for them.
Yes.
Obviously, there are some major releases where they're going to remove things that are deprecated. The one that scares me the most in 2025 is HTML edit format is being removed. And I have a lot of old code that definitely still uses a lot of HTML edit format functions, which is the encoder for anyone not familiar.
Is there any real nuance behind that? I mean, we're going through and we're changing that out everywhere just so that we can upgrade it at any time without having to think about that.
I don't think there's any nuance. I'm just going to replace it with encode for HTML. I could probably find and replace. I think it works exactly the same way.
Yeah.
I'm hoping.
Well, I've noticed that some of the jars aren't the same. I actually wrote a test library and I've identified all the jars that we tap into that are undocumented. Also, all of the jars that we use that we inject and load as part of our core platform. And I will go through and I hit a button and it'll go through and test all these jars to see if they exist and run a test and run a test and run a test. And what's interesting is sometimes the library will exist, but the class or the method or the function that you're trying to perform is no longer there. Yeah. And then we've got to scramble and find a new way to do that. But, you can't really get on Adobe for, switching out something to do that, that does something better. There's a lot of great jars out there and, my hat's off to them. And that's why I've started, side loading some of those older ones under, under a different name so I can continue to use them.
100%.
Yeah, you got to do what you got to do. Generate email hash code. We have so much spam that comes in. I want to show you this page here. This is actually one of my, this is a spam address that hit us. It hit us 162 times.
Oh, I see. It's all the different dots and stuff in different places.
Yeah, on Gmail, they've got something called a dot address. I'm not sure how many other mail providers support that. And then Gmail also supports something called the plus notation. Like after your email address username, you can put in a plus and type in a keyword. And then, like, say if I were to share my email address with the good folks over there at XByte, and then I say my name is James plus xbyte@gmail.com, and I start getting email from somebody else, I'm like, okay, I only gave this email address to one person. So, but here's what spammers will do, or not spammers, but comment form abusers, is they think, oh, you blocked that email address. Oh, you're so silly. And they'll use a plus address, or they'll do this dot trick. And in an effort to curtail that, one of the things that we've done is we return a number. I will take the username. I will take the domain. I've identified the domain. I'll then identify the username. I will remove everything after the plus, and I will remove all the periods. So that's what happens here. Also, you'll notice that I'm using replace all. Yep. If you're working with something that is cast as a string, and you'll see too, that I religiously Java cast as strings. Yeah, I think you can do it as a 2-string or even use trim. I've been using 2-string a lot because I found that it works with one thing where JavaCast does not work. But casting it to a string, you can then use replace all and then use that native Java regex. And there's like a lot of support information online for that. But I was having a bug back in the day where, again, after we Jsoup our page, sometimes we go through and we do some massive search and replaces. It was, I don't know if we were hitting a heap error or whatever, but I think Adobe said that they couldn't reproduce it. And then I was able to reproduce it. And I don't even know if it ever got fixed. But my way around that limitation was to always use replace all. And so you'll see me dropping down to that. I don't see that going anywhere soon. That's native Java.
Yeah.
So we will you strip the plus data, remove all the dots, and then we'll create a lowercase email address of both of those, and then it'll do the hash code trick. And I notice that sometimes hash code's like not always the same. It depends on your machine and how it's configured. But for the most part, I've discovered that all of our ColdFusion machines are like 100%. I've tried this across, even on TryCF and CFZip. It gives me the same value, so that's a good thing. But if it's not, I've actually written a function that does the same math as hash code. The only unfortunate thing is it's very, very, very slow comparatively. So what this does is, and you can see it from here, is even though these 162 email addresses, as I iterate over this massive JSON array payload, it evaluates to the same number. And, gotcha, you're not making it through my spam. And we've been doing this on a mailing list too. Whenever we get abuse, I break that down to that number. So if I have to search for an email address, rather than searching for an email address, I break that down to a number. And I can't tell you how much of a performance boost that has been searching for a number rather than a full-on text string. And again, if we're storing it with our email of use, we're storing this email address as 162 different email addresses. If I wanted to find this user, this abusive user, I would have to, drop down to this number anyway, because this is 162 unique strings. But it's one distinct ID signature from that based on the hash code.
It's pretty cool.
So if you need to stop email abuse and people are playing this trick on you and you don't realize it's happening, this is a great way to combat that.
Now, question for you. If you stripped out everything and just store the base URL, wouldn't that get you just one result as opposed to 162?
Oh, that would give us the email address, but I want to have a record of what they were using. If I strip that out, I have got no way of looking for that number, bringing it back, and I can say, give me that number and then give me all the distinct emails that they used under that number. And I see that, oh, wow, 162 email attempts. This person is not being very forthright. They're basically trying they're trying to circumvent my restrictions. I don't want you sending email because you're advertising something that my client doesn't care about.
Yep.
And that's on top of, all the WAF and IP address reputation and everything, and even CAPTCHAs. Even a spammer can enter a CAPTCHA correctly. But if he entered this address 162 different ways, I've got him blocked. And it's an easy thing to calculate. And again, performance-wise in the database, if you've got an email address, if you throw this in there, it's really a lot faster to search for that by that number. This particular one, enable WK-HTML to PDF forms. Kind of a long name. We had a client that was doing a survey, and when they were done with the survey, they could print it out, and they would get one with editable form fields. It worked great. I use a program called PDF Exchange. I don't know what you use for PDFs. Anybody using Foxit or an Adobe alternative? Or do you just use the browser?
I haven't done a lot of PDF stuff lately, but I've been so frustrated historically with the CF document tag only because it's not hit and miss. Maybe it's limited. It's limited in what it can do. And so I don't know. I don't have a good solution.
Yeah, for a reader, I use the Adobe's just reader.
Okay. Well, I did a PDF the other day and I put a watermark on it, and I'm like, because we put samples on all preview PDFs just so that it doesn't go out and people think it's the real one. And what happened was somebody said, "Hey, stop what you're doing. You posted, because I had to do some regeneration for them, and I had put out the sample, and I didn't realize it." And they're like, "Yeah," and they gave me a screenshot of it, and I'm thankful that they did that because I probably wouldn't believe them, because when I opened it up in PDF Exchange, that watermark didn't even exist, and I added the watermark using CF So I don't know if it's a special configuration with PDF Exchange, but this program is awesome. But it wasn't even showing the watermark. If I dropped it into the browser, I use Edge Dev. Boom, the watermark was right there and real big. And I'm sure if I put it in Adobe Acrobat, it would be there too. But yeah, this program wasn't showing the watermark. And for that, I thank you. But, it gave me a false sense of whatever when I posted that on their website. I was posting something with the word sample on it or demo or whatever. But for this editable PDF, it was editable for us in the browser. It was editable for us with PDF Exchange. I think I even tried it in Foxit. Foxit is portable. I've actually used Foxit for automatic PDF printing in some cases. Foxit is a cool executable app in my world. But when you loaded it in Adobe Acrobat, all of a sudden, none of those fields became editable. And I didn't know why, because I made an editable PDF with WK-HTML. I mean, I did all the things that you needed to do. So basically, again, going back to my 15-year-old self, question is what happens if you open that file in an editor and start messing with some of the stuff? And I found some forums out there, and they basically said, find parent and change the word parent to something else. So I changed it to PopNet. And just by doing a hex replacement in this binary file of those words, and I can't do a demo of this, but trust me, it works. You can take your editable PDF that is uneditable in Adobe and run it through this process, and it will become an editable form with Adobe.
Oh, that's crazy.
So I'm not sure why. I don't know why. Yeah, it's just like, why the lock on that?
Some super smart person who knows all the formatting and how they get translated.
Yeah, and here I've got an actual flag too that says, only do this to WK files, because if it goes through and it doesn't find that it was created by WK-HTML to PDF, I probably don't need to do this, and we can leave it as is. So I added a little fail safe on there. But that's been great, because I did want to, our PDFs look really nice, and they're really small, and they generate really fast. I don't want to give any of that up. Temp cache. This basically is just a leverager for cache put. I can create any object I want. I didn't create a demo for this, but basically you give it a string, you give it an array, you give it an object of whatever you want. Specify how many minutes you'd like this to work. What's the max minutes? Is this a single use? And what should the cache prefix be? Because what we're going to do is we're going to take this value and we're going to stick it into the system cache using cache put and use cache get. And then if it expires and it's a single use, we're going to use cache remove. Now, the reason I like this is this works in an environment where you might not have client variables and you need to send somebody someplace else and have them come back. And, client variables are great, but if I give you, this returns a UUID. So when I'm running it the first time, and I have this whole demo here that works, but I can't do this whole workflow on try CFML. But what it does is the first time you run it, cache token, and if I were to take this whole object here, which is an object, how many minutes, max minutes, this is the object that's going to get cached. And then again, I'm using argument collection again.
Heck yeah.
Ben, you said you like this. I said I like this too, because if I wanted to dump this to see, hey, what's going on,
right?
I've got that information right here. So it makes it a lot clearer for me than trying to put all that information into this call right here. And so what it does is it gives me a token. It gives me a UUID. And then what I'm able to do is type in that UUID or whatever, and then say, you know what, do you have anything that matches this UUID as it comes back up? If it's not valid, you've made a mistake. We're going to throw an error and say invalid token. Sometimes you might not want to do that. Sometimes you might want to silently ignore any errors and just send them someplace else. But it gets that cache. If it can't find the struct, it says cache key doesn't exist. In this case, since I was adding IP address to this, I've added this to my validation up here. I passed it an IP address. I'm expecting an IP address to be in it. Also, I passed an IP address. I'm expecting that you went away and you came back. I'm expecting you to have that same IP address that I gave you when you left. If you don't have it, maybe I should throw an error right here. And then finally, that cache data is retrieved. Now we can process the rest of the request. And then if we have to, maybe redirect to a thank you page. You don't want to keep them on this page. I've seen that before where sometimes people end at a processing page. Have you seen this, Ben? Where you keep them at that processing page and it was a post. And if they're on a mobile device and then later on they open up their mobile device, that mobile device will open and it'll do a form post to that page.
Oh, that's funny to kind of refresh it.
Yeah, and then you'll get some sort of email, and I get an email whenever that happens, indicating that, hey, somebody just did a post to your website, but it was an empty form post. What's that about? So
that's funny.
I monitor a lot of stuff. So what happened with that is, what you need to do is when you're done processing something from a post, you need to redirect them to some sort of get page. Don't keep them there because the iPhones, when they open that back up, it'll try to reprocess that with maybe data, maybe not data. I haven't really gotten to the end of it. It's just, I know I'm not doing it and I don't know how to stop it, but this has stopped it when we've redirected them to an actual thank you page. And here's the cool thing with the thank you page. Sometimes we want to say, well, here's your invoice number. Here was the total of your price. When we direct them to that thank you page, what we'll do is we'll use this temp cache thing and we will put that information in there. We say, your invoice number is not an integer. We don't want to use a serialized integer. And the price and all that stuff. And we don't want to pass that as a form variable. We also don't want to pass that in the URL. And I see a lot of sites do that. We also don't want to put that into the client variables or session variables, especially if client variables are stored as cookies. We want to keep that as hidden as possible. And again, sometimes our sites don't even have session or client variables enabled. And in those cases, you can't even use that. So what do? This is when we put it into the cache, the server cache, and then retrieve it on the next page. If that UUID matches, I'm now able to show you your stuff. And then again, if you don't have it on that thank you page, we just say thank you for your order, and then we remove the details. But they might want to be able to print it. And if they want to print it, I'd rather that print process not be a post as well, because sometimes weird stuff happens when you send something off to a printing process. It's going to wonder what conditions was I called? Do I need to resubmit everything that I resubmitted when this page was called up? It's just better to be safe than sorry.
Are you expiring then sessions on IP address change, like from Wi-Fi to mobile?
Well, in this particular context, he's added some logic to make sure that the IP address hasn't changed, but that's not inherent to the cache itself. That's just how he's consuming it, I think.
Right. This is from one page to another page. If I have to process something and then send you someplace else, and I want to also show some information on that page, I hope you're not, this is all done kind of within the same request, sometimes within 1 second. The information shouldn't change, but the last thing I want to do again is make a hidden form and do a JavaScript post on that form, because what if the user has JavaScript disabled? I can do a location.href and a header request, and that should work. But then I might have issues getting that data into the cookie if I had to do that. Again, I don't know if client variables are enabled. I don't know if session variables are enabled. In fact, those things shouldn't even be a consideration if you're using this. So it's just a server controlled thing. It gives you a token. I go to the next page. I say, I got a token, and it says, thank you for the token. And I can either choose to show extra data or not show any extra data. In fact, on a lot of our thank you pages are just thank you. Thank you. So if you were to share that link with somebody else and that UUID expired years ago, or 10 minutes ago, or if you had it 5 minutes ago, and if it's set to expire in 30 minutes, that UUID would continue working for a total of 30 minutes, unless you told it to be a single use. If you configured it initially as a single use, it would expire upon first attempt to use it. So
And
that's
a
just kind
single
of what it
use
does.
token has a lot of great value. You could
Yes.
send out one-time passwords. Like I was listening to the Syntax FM podcast the other day, and they were talking about oftentimes if you want to log into something like Hulu or Disney Plus, you can get a one-time, like a 6-digit code sent to your phone, and then that's what you enter into the TV to log you in on the smart TV. And but you want to make sure that only gets used once. You don't want other people to be able to log in with those codes.
Yeah, and the TOTPs, those are like really short. We do that with we text those out too with logins as part of an MFA approach to login. But this is because the UUID is either going to be passed as a form variable or a URL variable directly visible in the thing, and we don't want that to live forever. But yeah, being as a single thing, as soon as you get to that page, if you were to hit refresh, the next time you hit refresh, even like 2 seconds after, that data has now been erased. And again, if we were doing like a silent thing, not throwing errors, that page would just say thank you. It wouldn't show you the details of your order anymore because it was a single use. We didn't have an expire of 30 minutes on it. So there's kind of like a multi-use thing here. You can make it single use, and you can make sure that after 30 minutes, this is the other thing I love about cache put, as you can say, I'm creating this, and after 30 minutes, 5 minutes, 2 minutes, whatever it is, expire it, and I'll move it from your cache. I don't have to do any scheduled cleanup. The cache
I gotta spend more time learning about the cache. I've known that it's been there forever, and I just have never really integrated it into my application development mindset. And I think I end up reinventing the wheel in a lot of cases because I have to build that exact kind of logic into my functions and components. And I just it's laziness. I just should be learning it and using it.
Yeah, and there's some benefits to this. There's some dangers too. If you're in I don't know if you're in a shared environment where everybody's got just a protected directory. I don't know. I've been helping other people out, and sometimes it's crazy what you're able to find. But I know that you can go through and dump the scope of the cache and get all the cache keys.
Oh, interesting.
In fact, I've done that in another project where I'm like, I need data and I want that data to be eternal. I don't want it to ever expire. And I'm able to actually modify the cache objects, and I'm able to actually make keys that are our keys were like meaningful. It helped identify clients and stuff. So I have some sort of quick lookup that says the key name is this. Oh, then it's for this. And kind of a nice little management portal, because we have this the client, they do like lots of results for like lots of tests. And when we're crunching that data, it's not going to change today. It's not going to change tomorrow. It's not going to change next week. It changes when a new report is generated. And until a new report is generated, I don't need to show you any new data because the data hasn't changed. So what we'll do is we will use cache put, and again, very complex key naming strategy here, and store that for an extended period of time. But having things auto expire is so sweet not to have to clean it up. Like,
100%.
Who was complaining about that? Somebody was complaining about client variables stored on the database, and that, they were noticing like every 30 minutes their server would have hiccups and stuff. And it's just like, oh, you've got bots coming to your website and they've got to do those cleanup of all those client variables or session variables, one or the other. And because of that whole session cleanup thing, it was just really causing havoc with their performance.
Oh, we actually, we put out something about that. Yeah, we had a customer who had that very issue, and we walked them through different techniques.
Yeah, because not everything needs to be put in that, and you really don't have much control over that black box.
I'm getting to the end of my window where I have to take off in a little bit. So let's. I don't mean to rush us, but
we're almost at the end.
All right.
Reescape is a function that I like. It's built into ColdFusion. Unfortunately, Lucee doesn't have it. So I wrote a function here that basically takes your string and applies regex to it to kind of like escape all of the sensitive characters. Now, Ben, you've got a function that does this too, and you actually go down to the Java level, and I saw that it actually placed characters at the beginning and at the end of it. And I didn't want to dip down into Java, and I also wanted to make more of a purist approach at it. And I've had this be like super effective. I don't think I have. I don't have it here, but that was one of the ones that I did. So you can see all these tests. If you were to go online and do this, it escapes them, and it escapes them the same as Adobe's Reescape does. And
Nice.
yeah, don't try this in Lucee; it'll blow up.
Reescape, for anyone listening, is the RE here stands for regular expression. So there's a lot of special characters and regular expression patterns. And sometimes you want those special characters to just be literal characters and not have any special meaning. And so that's what the escaping does. But yeah, I oftentimes have to escape stuff. It's great.
Well, again, since we use replace all over the place, I'm definitely having to fall back and use this all the time because I never know what data a client might put in there if they use any of these characters. And somebody did a name once, and I wasn't expecting one of these characters to be in the name, but since it was, it kind of like blew up our whole mail merge process. Because
Nice.
So we religiously add this now whenever we're using a regular expression, unless of course we're writing the regular expression ourselves and it's 100% static. Mask CC. Now this is something that, how many developers out there do a CF dump and then send themselves the CF dump via email, or
I don't know what you're
save
talking about, James.
or save it to the file system. Well, again, I was saying that I wrote my own dump thing, and I talked with the guy that does the CF dump as well. And I said, hey, do you have any way to obfuscate some of this data? Because there's some sensitive stuff here. He actually built in a function that did it differently than I would, which is great. But mine was just a lot more simpler. I'm basically looking for a very specific pattern with spaces, underscores, dashes that represents a social security, or not social security number, but a credit card number. And I'm using the credit card, which is basically the LUN algorithm to say, hey, take these numbers after you've got all digits. Is this a valid credit card, Adobe? And if so, let's go ahead and replace every one of those characters with dashes and show the last four. And as you can see here, whoops, not here, but here, I've got a number of, these are all from test credit card websites. Don't worry, your credit card history is safe. But as you can see here, as I went through this test and I did my dump of the value that has now been decoded, this is a much safer approach. And we work with a couple banks. The last thing I wanted to do to any bank was to say, hey, here's my credit card number. Go ahead and charge me, and have that whole thing be exposed in their email, or even send something to another client who might have a Gmail account. I don't trust. I mean, who's got access to your mail?
Well,
really
beyond email, one of the places that we have run into this historically is we'll have a centralized error catching mechanism where any error that has bubbled up to the kind of outer layer of the application that isn't caught, we will oftentimes log it to something, and then we will include the URL scope and the form scope. But that could have the person's password in it. It could have credit card information. So there is these kind of hoops we jump through to make sure that we're not logging someone's password to the to Kibana or Loggly or Datadog or something.
Right. Yeah. I'm using New Relic these days, and I really liking their plan. We're not paying anything. Yeah, we don't consume enough data to have to pay them anything, so that it's just amazing. But yeah, with this, you can see here, after I've done all these tests, this is just I'm dumping the data to the screen or an email. So I used a CF save content. I do my dump, and then I mask CC of that whole HTML string, and that's what you're seeing here. So when I take that object that I used for my testing, you can see that all the keys now are, if they're valid CC numbers, detectable. Some of them have spaces, some of them have dashes, some of them have underscores, trying to get past the whole security thing. Some of these were too long or too short. So it's just a great way to remain PCI compliant, because I think if you've got things going out to a log that might contain this info, or things being sent via email to the client under even the best of intentions, probably not something that should be done. They should never be plain text.
We have salespeople who will put in a note on a customer account the credit card number you use.
Awesome.
And so if they knew that to be masked, then they would bear, well, let me actually put it in the correct place.
Yes.
Let me actually, as opposed to just putting it in a text note somewhere. So that's really cool.
Oh, and that's it. We've made it to the end.
Oh, freaking love ColdFusion.
We're just gonna trap that.
So James,
Yeah.
at CF Summit 2024 out in Las Vegas, your son was there.
Yes.
Was that the most amazing time of his year, or was it like the second most amazing time of his year?
I think he enjoyed the food. I tried. He wants to be like a data scientist in the marine biology type of thing. Well, maybe not a data scientist. I don't really He's into his second year of college. He still has time to figure it out.
Yeah, absolutely.
We live right next to the marine sanctuary here. There's lots of opportunity. I just want him to see what was available, and hopefully feel a little proud about his dad. Get to see that, because he just sees me in my room all the time, just looking at two screens and maybe on a phone call talking to the air.
Dad,
I don't have a big community. I'm a developer of one when it comes to the ColdFusion here. I don't have anybody to sharpen iron with, and I'm, okay. Now I'm now sounding kind of sad, but I wanted to make it look a little cooler to him. I don't know if he'll be attending this next year. I'm hoping to get him in because, he's still a college student, still falls under those things. And I'd still like him to, to get into it and maybe take over in the future with some of the stuff. But
nice. Well, I'm hoping to go this year as well. So,
well, I've had some people from the Ortis camp say that I should probably consider speaking. I'm thinking maybe a CF Frankenstein this year. I'm going to submit it. We'll see what happens. Went to the local, what was that called? The breakfast that they were putting on, ColdFusion 2025 road shows. Yeah, there were maybe about 12, 15 people in San Francisco or San Jose when I went to Adobe headquarters. And I spoke at length, and I mentioned the is hex code valid? I don't know if you've seen my UDF, but I have a UDF that says, is this hex code valid? And because, you can do is UUID valid, you can do is GUID valid, but how about, I just wanted to see if a 6-digit hex color code was valid. There was nothing that existed for that. So I wrote this and I said, this should be this is basic. You can do this, but you can't do this. And then the guys from Ortis got back to me and said, we're adding it to Boxlane. and I just thought that was so cool. And I mentioned that, that I liked their response to like one of my recommendations. I said, I usually don't even get the bugs fixed that I report to Adobe until 3 versions later or whatever. I said, it's kind of frustrating. And the response was, wait a minute, you shared that on LinkedIn? She goes, I like that. I'm a fan. And I'm like, okay, cool. But I'm going to put in, I've never done it before. I'm thinking I can speak. I don't know.
Heck yeah.
Again, haven't done it. A little worried about it. So I'm going to put in this year and we'll see what happens.
You have a lot of great, even the tips and tricks. I think more things at the summit to kind of teach all these little things about how to be more efficient and lessons learned.
My next focus is going to be on performance, because I'm going to look at standardized and my alternative EXE approach to things. And I just want to see how they compare in terms of how long did it take to get that done? How big was the payload? How large was the output? How nice is the output? Hey, you made output. Can I optimize that output even further? What does that look like? So we'll see. I'll be doing that all on mycfml.com.
There you go.
Very cool.
I got a lot of testing to do.
Maybe Ben will speak this year too.
Hide behind my microphone. All right,
well, guys. Well, James, thank you very much for joining us this week. A lot of great information. I got to showcase how I'm a developer light by misunderstanding the caching on that one. So that's okay. See,
there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of moving parts.
To show everybody that even if you have a light understanding of it, ask questions. It's okay if you're wrong. Absolutely. If you have no idea.
Oh, I'm wrong a lot of times. I have to challenge every assumption that I have, even going into a new version of ColdFusion, because I thought it worked this way. I'm going to assume it works the same way, but I'm going to test. My .NET brother always says, trust but verify. He's been taken for a ride too often, and he's kind of hammered that into me. So I trust but verify.
Bring your brother to CF Summit.
Yeah. Well, he started out as a ColdFusion developer.
Did he really?
Yeah, but there was more money in the finance sector if he learned .NET, so he left.
Fair enough.
All right. Well, on that note, we will. What a way to end it. We'll trap Ben's. I freaking love.
But you know,
ColdFusion.
yeah, but you know what? When we talk, he knows that I'm enjoying my job more than he enjoys his job.
There you go. The ultimate victory.
Yeah. Totally.
All right. So now, on a positive note, we'll end on that note.
There we
All
go.
right. Well, guys, thank you very much for joining us, James. And we mentioned in the beginning, if anyone wants to reach you, they can find you on Sunstar Media. Your URL is just sunstarmedia.com, I believe.
Yep. And I'm on Twitter as James Over, and that rhymes with James Moberg. Kind of.
Oh, there you go.
That's why I went with that. I'm phonetically challenged. We were doing a Doom gaming when I was in my early 20s, and somebody kept yelling, James Over. And I thought they were yelling, James Moberg. So that's become my handle. But yeah, no, I'm on the social media platforms. I'm not hard to find. Find me, ask me. I'm helping somebody out right now with a complicated PDF solution that I saw on Stack Overflow. I think somebody tweeted it out recently too. They got 96 gig of RAM and they're having issues doing PDFs. I'm going to see if I can. They've got 20 virtualized servers. And I looked at their stuff and I was able to help them, and I'm going to see if I can help them even further. So I'm always looking for a challenge.
Nice. So find James. He's out there. He's out there on social. Ben's out there on social. I'm out there on social posting stuff. So find us. But James, thank you so much for saying yes to this. I had a great time learning some stuff, and hopefully others will learn more and be able to kind of make their experiences more efficient and use your UDFs.
Great.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great day. Enjoy the show.
Catch you later.
Cheers, everybody.
All right.